Fantasy Football Christopher Knox added Chris_Knox featured columnist September 21, 2018 Jonathan Daniel. Getty ImagesTime flies when you're having fun, or in this case, after a heavy dose of NFL action. It seems like only yesterday that we were running down fantasy draft rankings. Now we're into week 3, and some fantasy owners may already be scrambling to keep their playoff hopes alive. Hopefully, your early draft picks are performing as expected, making it a no-brainer to keep them in your lineup every week. The decisions involving those second-tier players are what generally make or break a fantasy week. We're here to help with those decisions. We'll be looking at some of the toughest Week 3 matchups and deciding whether players are worth the start. We'll be analyzing factors like early season performances, opponent and player health. We'll be making our choices based on point per reception (PPR) scoring formats. Lions, Getty Images. Houston Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson was a popular name during fantasy drafts, but he hasn't been a consistent star thus far this season. He had only 176 passing yards in Week 1 and has 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions and a lost fumble through 2 games. Lighting it up like last year, he is not. This week, Watson goes up against a Giants defense that is allowing an average of 301.5 yards per game, 6th fewest in the NFL. We still like him this week, though. Watson looked more like his 2017 self against Tennessee in Week 2, 310 passing yards, and he'll be playing in front of Houston's home crowd Sunday for the first time this season. The Giants' defense proved susceptible to big plays last week when it gave up a 64-yard touchdown reception to Tavon Austin. Expect Watson to hit a few big plays through the air and to take advantage of his legs regularly. Cowboys QB Dak Prescott rushed for 45 yards against the Giants last week, and Watson should be able to top that number. Verdict, start projection, 295 yards passing, 65 yards rushing, 3 TDs. Tom Shirebowski, Getty Images. Get ready to witness Battle of Los Angeles this weekend. No, not the subpar Aaron Eckhart movie from 2011. Instead, the Los Angeles Rams and Los Angeles Chargers will be dueling Sunday afternoon. Chargers quarterback Philip Rivers has been superb through 2 weeks, passing for 680 yards with 6 touchdowns and only 1 interception. However, he'll be facing a dominant Rams defense this week, one that has made other quarterbacks look foolish. So far, the Rams have allowed 266.0 yards per game, 3rd fewest in the NFL, and they've come away with 4 interceptions. They'll be playing at home, where they shut out the Arizona Cardinals a week ago. Rams have given up only 6.5 points per game, so we cannot expect Rivers to be repeatedly throwing into the end zone. Add in their defense's proven ability to create takeaways and Rivers becomes a risky option, even if he does produce plenty of yards between the 20s. Verdict, sit projection, 275 yards passing, 1 TD, 2 int, 1 fumble. Matthew Stockman, Getty Images. Undrafted rookie running back Philip Lindsay has been one of the NFL's biggest surprises this season. Despite being part of a committee, he has already rushed for 176 yards and has added 3 receptions for 35 yards and a score. However, the Denver Broncos refuse to name Lindsay anything more than part of that committee, which can make things difficult on fantasy owners. To have 3 guys who are all different is really tough on defenses, head coach Vance Joseph said, per Zach Kelberman of 247 Sports. He can beat us no. 3 RB, and still get 10 touches or 12 or 14. If Lindsay gets only a handful of carries in a given week, fantasy owners will pay dearly. Don't expect that to happen against the Baltimore Ravens in Week 3. While the Ravens have a stout overall defense, 263.0 yards per game allowed, they showed cracks against the Cincinnati Bengals last week. Expect Lindsay to be the big play hitter in a Denver offense that will look to protect quarterback Case Keenum with the ground game. Verdict, start projection, 90 rushing yards, 2 receptions, 25 yards, 1 TD. Brett Carlson, Getty Images. Buffalo Bills running back LeSean McCoy has regularly been a fantasy stud over the past few seasons, but he's been a disappointment through the first 2 weeks of 2018. He has only 61 yards rushing and 5 receptions for 28 yards. Don't expect McCoy to bounce back against the Minnesota Vikings this week. Minnesota has an aggressive defense that has allowed the 6th fewest fantasy points to running backs, according to Fantasy Pros. The Vikings will be facing a rookie quarterback in Josh Allen, so they'll most likely spend the entire game daring Allen to beat them. On top of a tough matchup, McCoy is also dealing with cracked rib cartilage, according to NFL Network's Ian Rapoport. McCoy is expected to play, but he won't be at 100%. Being at less than 100% against a fast, physical front seven is a recipe for disaster, even for a shifty runner like McCoy. Verdict, sit projection, 55 rushing yards, 2 receptions, 12 yards. Kevin C. Cox, Getty Images. Carolina Panthers running back Christian McCaffrey is not a surefire fantasy star in standard scoring formats. He has only 87 yards rushing through 2 weeks, and he failed to top the 100-yard mark in combined rushing and receiving yards in Week 1, but in PPR formats, McCaffrey is a viable starter even against stingy defenses, like the one he'll face Sunday. The Cincinnati Bengals have allowed an average of 70.5 rushing yards per game so far, 3rd fewest in the NFL. They held Ravens RB Alex Collins to a mere 35 rushing yards and 3 receptions in Week 2. However, McCaffrey is going to get you points even if he doesn't rack up the yards. He had a whopping 14 catches against the Atlanta Falcons last week, and while repeating that number is unrealistic, McCaffrey should still be able to put up a half-dozen receptions against Cincinnati. McCaffrey should be a safe start based on receiving volume alone. Verdict, start projection, 40 rushing yards, 6 receptions, 45 yards receiving, 1 TD. Mark Brown, Getty Images. Unlike McCaffrey, Tennessee Titans RB Derrick Henry holds more value in standard formats than in PPR. Bruising runner shares a backfield with Dion Lewis, who is unquestionably Tennessee's receiving back. Lewis' presence has prevented Henry from becoming the breakout star some expected him to be. Lewis has picked up right where DeMarco Murray left off last year, keeping Henry's production in check. Through 2 weeks, Henry has only 82 rushing yards on 28 carries and 1 reception, although he did throw an 8-yard pass last week. Don't expect Henry to suddenly break out against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who allowed a minuscule 82 yards rushing a week ago. If Henry was more of a receiving threat, he might be worth a start. The Titans are going to look for ways to protect their quarterback, whoever it may be. Marcus Mariota is still dealing with a hand injury, against Jacksonville's pass rush with quick passes. Since Lewis is Tennessee's receiving back, Henry is purely bench fodder. Verdict, sit projection, 60 rushing yards. Dustin Bradford, Getty Images. The Broncos will likely try to limit Case Keenum's exposure to Baltimore's defense. The Ravens have 6 sacks and 2 interceptions this season, while Keenum has thrown 4 picks, by utilizing the running game. However, this doesn't mean Keenum won't be passing at all in Week 3. Keenum's favorite target, Emmanuel Sanders, is still a safe start. Sanders has racked up 14 receptions already this season, 10 in Week 1. He also has 231 yards and a touchdown. Sanders will have a favorable matchup working out of the slot. According to Rich Reiber of RotoWorld, Ravens slot corner Tavon Young surrendered 6 catches for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. Keenum clearly trusts Sanders, so if the Ravens' pass rush does start getting to him, he's likely to start looking to Sanders as a first read. Don't be surprised if Sanders grabs at least a half-dozen balls Sunday. Verdict, start projection, 7 receptions, 85 yards, 1 TD. Joey Robbins, Getty Images. Green Bay Packers Wr. Randall Cobb became a popular name in fantasy after amassing 9 receptions, 142 yards and a touchdown in Week 1. He also happens to catch passes from Aaron Rodgers, which tends to be a good thing in fantasy. However, Cobb fell off in Week 2, finishing with only 30 yards and fumbling once. This week, he faces another tough matchup, as the Washington Redskins have allowed 161.0 passing yards per game, fewest in the NFL. Rodgers is also still dealing with the knee injury he suffered in Week 1, and he admitted he's concerned about doing further damage. "Yeah, obviously that's a concern," Rodgers told reporters Wednesday. "Hopefully it goes the other way, though. An inconsistent receiver, a tough defense and a damaged quarterback? It's hard to see Cobb as a reliable option this week." Verdict, sit projection, 4 receptions, 45 yards. Ezra Shaw, Getty Images. Oakland Raiders tight end Jared Cook had a stellar Week 1, 9 receptions, 180 yards, before cooling off with an average Week 2, 4 receptions, 49 yards. So, where will he fall against the Miami Dolphins in Week 3? Likely somewhere in between. The Dolphins have an underrated defense that has allowed only 16.0 points per game. That means fantasy owners shouldn't count on Cook to cross the goal line. He hasn't yet. However, Miami has surrendered an average of 270.0 passing yards per game, 24th in the NFL, and has only 3 sacks. That suggests quarterback Derek Carr should be able to get going. When Carr is playing well, it behooves Cook, who has become a major piece of the Raiders' offense this season. Expect Carr to look for his tight end early and often. Verdict, start projection, 5 receptions, 85 yards. Britt Carlson, Getty Images. The New Orleans Saints offense had a rough outing last week against the Cleveland Browns, totaling only 21 points and losing 2 fumbles. Does that make the Atlanta Falcons' Saint a solid streaming option at home? The short answer is no. While the Falcons' defense does have its merits, it has 2 interceptions, 4 sacks and has allowed an average of 21.0 points per game. The Saints are a familiar foe that will be looking to rebound in a big way. Don't be shocked if Drew Brees and co. get back on track in a game that could easily turn into a shootout. Verdict, sit projection, 31 points. Allow 2 sacks, 1 int.